Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. The Baltimore Orioles were away on Preakness weekend, and Luke, I remember back when Preakness and Orioles baseball, there would be a game that night sometimes, and people would be in town, and I remember when I was assaulted by the Oriole bird, it was the night before Preakness weekend. No such fortune here this weekend, and probably not a bad thing that many people checked out on the Orioles this weekend, right?
Yeah, well, when you're completely shut down by Shane Bieber and Adam Plutko, it's not the best weekend.
Is he related to Justin Bieber?
Yeah, exactly. They would have had a better chance against Justin.
Do they have Bieber fever in Cleveland? I'm not sure.
But it was a miserable weekend and a miserable road trip. This was a team, and look, we're always talking about grading on a curve, so to speak, and how we're talking about this team. But the first 10 days or so of May, they were pitching a little bit better. The bullpen looked like it was maybe kind of, sort of, finding a couple guys you could depend on. And, well, that went by the wayside on the road trip. I mean, 1-5 road trip, a couple losses that were just flat out ugly. And they didn't swing the bats well other than one or two games on the entire road trip. So, we've talked a lot about Brandon Hyde getting these guys to compete and kind of talking about playing as well as they're capable of playing. I didn't really get that feeling watching them play over the course of the week. I mean, it was brutal. I mean, it was a brutal road trip and lots of defensive lapses and some silly mistakes and the kind of thing that, even through all the losses, you haven't seen them do a whole lot. They did stuff like that on the road trip, and that's disappointing. It's not shocking by any means, but that's something that they seem to have avoided for a good chunk of the first 5 weeks of the season, 6 weeks of the season, and we saw more and more of that over the road trip, and it reflected in the fact that they went 1-5, and with the Miami Marlins having a good weekend, they're right there now, back in on the cusp of being the worst team in baseball and having the number 1 overall pick next year. So I guess that's the silver lining if you're looking at the big picture.
Well, I rubbed elbows with John Angelos over the weekend. It was one of the rare times I was actually in the same room with him. I can't really think of 2 or 3 other times in my life. I didn't engage him because I was in the governor's tent and, I was 2 drinks in, but I'm not a guy that's 5 drinks in and it's Preakness Day and, well, what's the upside of all of this? But I almost tweeted over the weekend, there's no way Mr. Angelos is going to allow this team to not get the number 1 pick in the draft next year. I mean, and I'm feeling that way as they're getting 1 hit and they're losing 10-0. And how many position players are we going to see pitch this year before it's all over with? How many 5 and 6 and 7 home run games, popcorn machines, are you going to be subjected to down here on these lonely summer nights when it is 97 and the ball's flying out on a Thursday night, right? But more than anything, I guess this weekend, you see them play Cleveland. You get into these stretches where, they're going to lose 8 of 10, they're going to lose 11 of 4, because that's who they are. And they're also going to have a stretch where they're going to go 5-2, I guess. They're going to hit the right spot in the right place. But most nights, they're so outclassed, right? To use a horse racing expression, you know what I mean? You've got... in horses, we'd say we got pigs running with horses. We have quad A players trying to beat the New York Yankees. That's probably not going to go well most of the time.
Yeah, and that's why, I'm not surprised by really anything that's happened so far this season. Now, a couple individual performances here or there. We've talked about Dwight Smith. The latest kind of pleasant surprise has been Stevie Wilkerson playing center field and never played there before, and he's actually looked competent in center field.
All of this is going to remind me, a guy my age, of Ken Gerhardt and Jim Traber.
Oh, sure.
And, guys, Bill Ripken hit 400 the first 6 weeks he was in the league, and then he became a 250 hitter or whatever he was. You know what I mean? Like, I'm all with the flash on all of this. It's still, I think Mancini's the one guy on the team, literally. That what year we were in? 2019, 2024. Wake me up after the All-Star break in 2024. How many of these human beings will still be playing Major League Baseball? I'll give you Mancini. I don't know about most of the rest of them.
Well, I mean, there's some other. I mean, Jonathan VR is a legitimate major league player. He was
But I don't know if
before
he
the
will
Orioles.
be 5 years from now.
Sure.
That's all I'm
well,
saying.
I mean, he's still a pretty young guy. But your point's well taken, and we've talked about it over and over. And by the way, I don't think Trey Mancini's going to be on this team in 5 years.
No. I mean in the big leagues.
Oh, yeah.
No, I'm just talking about guys that are like worthy of being in. Not guys who are going to be in the league a year from now. That's less than half of these guys. I'm talking about 5 years from now. Is there anybody on this team that projects as a Major League Baseball player, a real player, a guy that sticks and plays 8 to 10 years in the league? I'll take $1 on Mancini and I'll let you have the field, literally the field. And that's not. I don't know where Dylan Bundy's going to be, but it doesn't look like he's going to be in the big leagues 5 years from now.
Yeah, I mean, and let's be clear. I mean, 5 years is an eternity. I mean, 5 years ago, I mean, you're talking about Chris Davis being a year off of a 50-plus home run season. So a lot can change in 5 years. But your point's well taken. I mean, I'm not.
Well, if you're going to be developmental, be developmental. Don't do it with 28-year-olds. You know what I'm saying? Like that would be my thought about it. But it doesn't matter who they're doing it with now. They're getting one hit and they're losing 10-0 when they play good teams because that's just who they are. That's why we don't talk about it every day around here, because we would go nuts. At least I would go nuts. I go nuts trying to watch it every night. I really do.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you, and certainly this road trip specifically was difficult to watch. Again, it goes back to expectations, and I'll even go back to a point I made to you at the beginning of the season that there was, at the very least, a novelty to some of these guys that you didn't really know them all that well, guys that you didn't really know what to expect. And
by the way, they had fun names. I mean, Rio Ruiz. Who doesn't want a baseball card of Rio Ruiz?
Right, right. But now that you've seen most of them, and look, let's be very clear about this. I mean, Dwight Smith, even though he's really struggled over the weekend, struck out 4 times on Sunday, he's been a pleasant surprise. I mean, he might be a guy who's a major league player and sticks around for however many years, whether it's with the Orioles or somewhere else. I mean, so it's not as though there haven't been any bright spots whatsoever, but yeah, in its totality, and we knew this. We knew that this 2019 Orioles club wasn't littered with guys that you're intrigued about for the future. I mean, the whole point was they're still in this surveying the wreckage, placeholder, quad A, past their prime, never will be type phase with these guys that are on the 25-man roster, and you're trying to see if you can uncover a couple diamonds in the rough. And Dwight Smith has hit well. I mentioned Stevie Wilkerson. Am I going to bet my mortgage payment on those guys sticking long term? No, but it's better than having no one do anything in that regard. But we knew that this was going to be the case, and to go back up to a point I was starting to make a couple moments ago, I think we've hit the point in the season now where guys who aren't performing at any level that is intriguing or interesting or thinking maybe, now you're starting to look at AAA and see who's performing there. I think a great example right now is DJ Stewart has been unbelievable at Norfolk in May. He's hit around 500 for the month of May. And people at the same time look at someone like Joey Rickard, who has hit around the Mendoza line, hasn't really done much, has had opportunities, and he's a guy who's been around for a few years. Now people starting to clamor and say, well, why isn't DJ Stewart up here hitting? What else can he do at AAA to prove himself? And I'll certainly hear that argument. So I think we've hit that point in the season now where not that there are necessarily an abundance of options at AAA, that are screaming for a call-up, but you look at a guy like Stewart, Keegan Aiken, the left-handed pitcher who was their co-minor league pitcher of the year last year, is at Norfolk and has had 2 consecutive really strong starts. I'm guessing the time's not right for him just yet because this is his first year in AAA, and they're going to try to get him to really master that level as much as possible. But he's a guy that people are going to be talking about. Cedric Mullins has been so-so at AAA, so I don't think a call-up for him is imminent. So, but we've reached that point in the season where you've seen these guys, you know what they can do, you know what they can't do especially, and there's definitely a sense from those who are still watching the Orioles on a semi-regular basis of, right, when are we going to start seeing some new blood mixed in? But at the same time, you don't want to just call up guys who aren't ready, guys who wouldn't benefit from more time in the minors, just because you don't have anything better at the major league level, because the goal is not to win at the major league level right now. These guys are competing, and I'll say this, for as ugly as it looks, I can't identify too many examples. And you know, Nestor, I watch most every single game. I can't identify too many examples of guys where I've said it was lackadaisical or they're jaking
Oh, they're
it
errors of effort. I mean, I'm not.
Yeah,
look,
exactly.
I mean, we're long past the point where Manny Johnny Hustle is jogging out a ground ball and whatnot, because all of these guys. That's part of this, is these guys are trying harder because none of these guys are rich. None of them project to be rich, but they're baseball players. So somewhere in there, somebody's trying to be Steve Pearce, literally, right?
Exactly. And you know, there have been a couple nice moments for some guys here and there. And I mentioned Dwight Smith. I mentioned Wilkerson. I mean, there have been, Rio Ruiz has swung the bat okay at times, has actually swung the bat pretty well in the month of May. Played good defense. So it's not as though it's been all terrible all the time. It's just mostly bad most of the time. And that's just, but that's, you knew that. And now you're at a point where you've seen these guys enough, and some of these guys, it's a case of, all right, is there anyone else you can take a look at? And look, I think we'll see DJ Stewart, and I think we'll see some others of that ilk at some point here over the next couple months. Some guys might be sooner rather than later, but at the same time, Mike Elias made it very clear with the demotions of Chance Sisco and Austin Hayes before he hurt his thumb in spring training. Those guys tore it up in the Grapefruit League, but the thought was, we're not looking at a sample of spring training games against a bunch of minor league pitchers and various levels of competition. We're not putting more stock into that over what these guys have done in the minor leagues, and in Sisco's case, what he didn't do in the major leagues last year, that they're going to play it out and let these guys master each level. And from a big picture standpoint, it makes a lot of sense to do it that way. From a short-term standpoint, it makes for less captivating losing baseball. It's one thing to lose. It's another thing if you're looking at the guys that are doing the losing and saying, well, it's not a whole lot here to really, not a whole lot of meat on the bone here for the future. I mean, it's kind of like talking about the Orioles in, say, 2010, 2011. They were bad those years. There's no question. But at the very least, you could point to Matt Wieters and Adam Jones and Nick Markakis. Nick Markakis wasn't all that young at that point. But there were at least some guys you could point to and say, those are guys that have a good chance to be part of a future that's hopefully better than what they are right now.
Or even a guy that's like going to make the All-Star team legitimately, like one pitcher and a position player or two that you would say, well, there's our number 3 and 4 hitter, and there's our number 1 starter, or our relief pitcher, or whatever.
Yeah.
Who's the All-Star on this team?
Trey Mancini.
Okay.
I mean, he's hitting 300. He has over a 900 OPS. I mean, I think it's pretty cut and dried. I mean, I think, overall, beyond him, you kind of look for all-star teams. We always talk about positions of weakness, right? Positions that are really deep around the AL, positions that are, a little more lacking. But it's Mancini at this point. I mean, it has to be. For as much as guys like John Means have done some nice things, they certainly haven't done enough to distinguish themselves on a league-wide level in the way that Mancini has. So, you look at him, and it's not as though everyone has played terribly, but you just look at the contributions. I mean, Michael Gibbons has had a nice year. He has 4 saves, and part of it is they don't have many save situations, and the other part is Brandon Hyde has actually used him in a little more of a fireman kind of role, kind of that traditional role that he's come in the 7th or 8th inning at times when they've had a chance to win some ball games. So, so it's not as though they don't have anyone who is at least in the conversation. Now, if you were going to talk about all-star team, if there wasn't a requirement for each team, then yeah, that'd be a little bit different. But Trey Mancini's had a terrific year. There's no doubt about that. And I think you'd look at what the numbers he's put up. Those numbers would play for any team, and you'd be talking about him as a potential all-star. Now, he's got to keep doing it, but he'd be the guy right now. It's pretty simple. I mean, VR's fallen off. I think he'll pick it back up, but again, he's not the best second baseman in the league or the best, top 3, top 4, anything like that. So, yeah, again, no one can be surprised by anything we've seen. I mean, you can look at a couple individuals here or there and say pleasant surprise, or you can look at a guy like a Dylan Bundy and say disappointment. But in its totality, this has been exactly what I expected it to be. I mean, I really can't sit here and have outrage or frustration.
Oh, I'm with you. I mean, it's hard to watch. He's Luke Jones, Baltimore Luke at WNST.net. The Yankees are coming to town. We got some sponsors. We got some new sponsors. Johnny D is back with us after so many years down in Amoski. So make sure you stop down to the Hideaway. And if anybody sees Johnny D, say thanks for coming back on and partnering with WNST, and make sure you order the shrimp salad. Also, our friends at Curio Wellness. I'm wearing the Curio purple shirt. They don't have the orange and black ones, although I do have orange and black sneakers. The Holistic Spa, top-of-the-line products with the holistic vitamins, the cannabis education, the spa. Everything you need is there. Brian Sanderoff going to be joining us here just south of Timonium Road on York Road. Learn more at Curio Wellness out on the web. We got Adams Jeep back with us. We're going to be doing some Raven shows up there in the fall. I want to give everybody some love up there. Everybody knows Adams in Aberdeen, adamsjeep.com. Find them out there. They put together their Jeep festivals coming up soon. We'll be telling you about that all summer long. Luke, for the Yankees and what this represents and them coming in right now, they're certainly getting the Yankees at the wrong time, aren't they?
Yeah, well, it's amazing to see what the Yankees have been able to do when you look at their injuries. I mean, Nestor, just look at what their lineup will be over the next few nights here in Baltimore against an Orioles team that we know is completely overmatched. I mean, there's no broadcasting of news in proclaiming that, but look at their lineup. I mean, look at the lineup they trotted out there against the Rays over the weekend, and they took care of business against the Rays. But DJ LeMahieu has been their leadoff hitter. I mean, he was a guy that was more, maybe not bench, but a guy that was going to be more of a complimentary player for them. I mean, Aaron Hicks has been in the heart of the order since coming back, and Luke Voigt and Gary Sanchez. Kendrys Morales, they just picked up. The Yankees picking up guys that have been DFA'd. I mean, that's what kind of territory they've been in, but Urshela's been huge for them. Gleyber Torres has been huge for them. It's just been remarkable to see what they've been able to do with the injuries that they've had. You assume they're going to get healthy, and they just did get Hicks back. So they're getting a little healthier, I'd say, but it really is remarkable to look at that team with the injuries that they've had and the guys that they've had on the IL.
If you'd say where they are right now, I mean, Judge had 73 at-bats, right? Stanton had 8 at-bats before it's over with. Before these guys are
games over 500 starting a new week.
Yeah, so Tulowitzki, 11. I mean, not that there were huge expectations there, but you look through that lineup and say where they spent their money and what their fans and their fan base would have been talking about in the offseason. They've certainly found their way to first place doing it a different way, which is kind of a tribute to the whole organization, the money they spend, Aaron Boone, the whole deal, right?
Yeah, and some of it's just, they've also had they've had bad luck with injuries. They've had some good luck with some of these players that they've plugged in. Let's face it, what they've gotten from Urshela, no one would have expected him to be hitting 346. I mean, it's pretty remarkable. And, Gleyber Torres, of course, he was a big-time prospect, so it's not as though it's stunning, but to the point you just made, they haven't had Judge. I mean, Stanton they haven't had basically all year, and they haven't missed a beat. Now, they haven't crushed the baseball the way that they did last year in terms of setting a record for home runs or anything like that, but they've gotten the job done.
And their story's their bullpen, though, right? I mean, it's becoming a 7-inning game for them, and it picks up. I'd
even say a 5 or 6 inning.
Yeah, where Rivera lets off, where they got 4 guys in the bullpen sucking up innings, coming out of the bullpen every night. I mean, all these guys got 20 appearances, all their ERAs are sub-3. Britton's the worst of them, and he's pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, it really is incredible to see what they've been able to do. And I mean, it's really a testament to them. And yeah, you can talk about the money and the same narratives that we always talk about with the Yankees, but they've tapped into some organizational depth, and they've had some young guys play well. And it hasn't just been about guys that they spend money on. It's been young players that have stepped in and
Sabathia finding the fountain of I don't know what it is.
Yeah. I mean, again, some of that. You look at the injuries, and they've had terrible luck with the injuries, but I don't know how they're getting some of the contributions they've gotten from some of those guys. I mean, you look at that lineup, and it looks a little bit better now than it did even a week or two ago. And you were just looking at that lineup, and you just scratch your head at what they've been able to do when you see those names. But and what's funny is you look at the numbers for their bullpen. Statistically, it still hasn't even been all that overwhelming, and I think some of that's probably some of their lesser guys have given up some runs. I mean, they're kind of middle of the pack in bullpen ERA, but just the depth that they have there. If it's a normal night, if they get a representative start of 5 or 6 innings, and they have a lead, most nights that's going to be all she wrote. Certainly for a team like the Orioles, but for even most teams in baseball, it's a lot to overcome. But it's been impressive to see what they've been able to do, given the injuries that they've had. I mean, we talk about this more so in football, right? You always talk about next man up, and the Ravens certainly have had some of their years where they've had a slew of injuries and trying to overcome that, and how difficult it is to overcome that. But yeah, the Yankees, even with all their injuries, they finished the weekend in first place after taking care of the Rays.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke, out on Twitter, and Luke at WNST.net. Yankees in all week. He will be out on social media getting it done. All of our WNST coverage brought to you by our friends at Cole Roofing, doing our Baltimore Positive series. We're going to be down at UMBC, right off the campus at State Fair in Catonsville and Frederick Road, with UMBC President Freeman Rabowski. Don Moeller, former Baltimore County Executive, my dear friend, joining us next Thursday. It is May 30th, Thursday morning, 9 a.m. at State Fair. The Baltimore Positive movement catching on. Make sure you're checking out everything we're doing out there. This week you'll hear from Aaliyah Cromer. The conversation with Barbara Mikulski, if you hear it here on the radio at AM 1570, crank it up and sit back. I learned so much about the history of Baltimore and the Fort McHenry Tunnel and Governor Schaefer, and it was fantastic. I don't know what else to say. Also, Damien O'Doherty was phenomenal this week. So with the Preakness, with the Orioles, and all that stuff imminent, Baltimore Positive, very, very relevant all summer long, perhaps more relevant than the Orioles bullpen. Spent some time in Essex here over the last couple weeks. I keep putting pictures up. Took my family to Al's Seafood for some crabs and some steamed shrimp, potatoes, and onions and a beer on Sunday night. You always try different things. I had crab imperial for the first time last week. I had never had the fried shrimp at Al's Seafood until Sunday night, and I did. It was delicious. So cheers to Chad the Crab Man for taking care of my family at Al's Seafood. I've been getting crabs and crab cakes there since the 1970s, and my fingers still smell like the Old Bay at Al's from Sunday night. Pizza John's. I was wearing my Pizza John's shirt while I was eating crabs at Al's, and I was going to go to Icy Delights, but they're closed on Sunday, but I'll be there Monday through Saturday, no doubt about that. So I spent a little time over in Essex, and on the way there, I stopped in Rosedale and gave the King a ring, too. My wife is back from her trip, which means that she's got plenty of beer because I don't drink her beer, but I drank all of my beer while she's away. So I had to get out to King Discount Liquors and give the King a ring, which you should do as well. Nasty at WNSC.net, the way to find me. Luke's at the ballpark. I'm around doing Baltimore Positive, getting ready for Memorial Day. It has been a wild week of conversations in regard to the Preakness around here, and I've seen the governor, I've seen the mayor, I've seen the city council president, I've sat with congressmen and Democrats and Republicans. I've posted audio and video of old conversations with Bob Ehrlich about the racetrack. So it's going to be a kind of a cool week around here. If you hear something on WNST, crank it up, and guaranteed you're going to be learning because I'm learning as I go. Nasty at WNST.net, the best way to find me, but always streaming live on our YouTube and our WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 at WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.